very much for taking the time with us today. I know you're a busy guy.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
So we'll get right into it. President Trump, on his first international trip, goes to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Why?
Well, first of all, the Saudi-U.S. relationship is strong, and it has been strong for 7 decades. This relationship started with President Roosevelt, who's a Democrat, and has been strengthening since then with different presidents of the United States, Democrats and Republicans. So this is a continuation of this historic, strong relationship that has, protected people of both countries on the security side, and also it has, on the economic side, created a lot of jobs and opportunities in both countries and helped the economy. President Trump's visit is an important visit to the Muslim world. I believe that it is vital for the United States to have a strong relationship with Saudi Arabia and the Muslim world. And I think the President's speech on that visit was very encouraging to Muslim people to see. He spoke about the counterterrorism, and he said that ISIS and the terrorist groups' victims are mostly Muslims. And I think it's very important for Muslim people to hear the President of the United States mentioning this.
What were some of the policies that were discussed during that trip? Obviously, counterterrorism was high on the agenda. I believe you opened the Center for Counterterrorism in Riyadh during that trip. What were some of the other policies?
Well, we have spoke about ways to increase our bilateral cooperation on the security side, defense, and most importantly, the economic side. We have continued to work with this current administration, and we will continue to work with the United States to build this important relationship.
Also, there was a big arms component for that trip. What happened there?
Well, there has been always a strong cooperation between Saudi Arabia and the United States on defense procurement. We have been an important customers to American companies that have created a lot of jobs throughout our cooperation on the defense procurement, and we'll continue to work with our United States and the American companies to build our armed forces that we use to counter terrorism and malign actors in the region.
Let's talk about terrorism in the region. What are the greatest threats to Saudi Arabia today?
Well, I believe the biggest threats to the region and to the international security is basically Iranian regime and its proxies on one side, and ISIS and Al-Qaeda and terrorist organization on the other side. We believe that they're both two sides of the same coin. They believe in the same concept, not necessarily exactly the same ideology, but they both do not believe in the sovereignty of nations. They both believe in transnational ideological state. They both do not believe in international law, and sometimes they compete with each other and they fight each other. But when it comes to us, we're the common enemy, and they cooperate.
Why are you the common enemy?
Well, because we are a force of stability, force of peace, force of prosperity in the region. What we want to do in Saudi Arabia is we have currently this great Vision 2030, where we want to reform our economy to basically untap the potential in Saudi Arabia, to open our new sectors in Saudi Arabia, and to have a prosperous country, and to move our citizens forward. To be able to do that, we need a stable, secure region. We need and prosperous region. We need to increase our economic cooperation with neighboring countries. Iran wants to export the revolution. Iran has an expansionist ideology. Iran wants other states in the region not to be our partners, but to be under the basically Iranian expansionist project. And this is a big difference. We have Vision 2030 that is moving us forward. They have Vision 1979 that is trying to move the region and Saudi Arabia backward.
I read an article that you wrote recently that compares Iran to Germany in the 30s, expansionist, and that we're sort of appeasing Iran in its expansionist policies. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, what I was trying to say in the op-ed is basically the situation in the world, especially in Europe, in the late 30s was back then we had this expansionist ideology in expansionist countries. We see Nazi Germany moving and taking over Austria and parts of Czechoslovakia, and the solution back then was to appease Germany, Nazi Germany, and instead of confronting it. And and we remember that during the Munich Agreement, when President Chamberlain went back to Britain and held that piece of paper and said, this is the peace of our time. And it did not work. Mm-hmm. It led to more expansionism. It led to the invasion of France. London was getting bombed after this. So what we want in the region is we see same expansionist concept in the region through the Iranian regime. And we believe that we need to push back on this right now, not to lead to a bigger conflict. Because if you look at the trend in the region throughout this 40 years after the Iranian Revolution, we see Iran started to build this sectarian terrorist militia in Lebanon. And they bombed embassies, they bombed the Marine barracks, they had assassinated the Prime Minister of Lebanon, and they're trying to copy that model and use the same playbook in Syria and Iraq and Yemen, and they've been getting away with it. So and now we see more than 160 ballistic missiles launched at a G20 country towards Saudi Arabia, and so if we do not push back on this, we will see more terrorist militia pops up in the region. And let's remember, Hezbollah in Lebanon is not a domestic threat. Hezbollah is transnational threat. We see Hezbollah money laundering activities throughout the whole world. We see in Africa and in South America. We see their drug activities also throughout the world. And we don't want another Hezbollah, another transnational threat to appear. And we don't want, especially in Yemen, like the Houthis, for example. It's another death to America group that we see in the region. And it's another transnational threat that we're trying to end. And to also affect the Red Sea, which 15% of the world trade passes through.
So let's unpack those countries that we talked about. We have Hezbollah in Lebanon. We have an increasing Iranian presence in Iraq. You have the Houthis in Yemen. So you're getting sort of Iranian presence surrounding Saudi Arabia. I mean, right now you have, let's say, 3 proxy conflicts. What happens when it ceases to be a proxy conflict?
Well, what we want in the region is different than what Iran wants in the region. We want partners. We want stability. We want security. We want countries that need to be independent. Saudi Arabia has 0 proxies in the Middle East. No one can name all the Iranian proxies in one sentence in the Middle East. I do not think the Iraqi people, the Yemeni people, the Lebanese people want to be part of basically the Iranian Revolution, part of Tehran. They want to be an independent country. They want to move forward. They want to fix their economy. So I don't think the Iranian controls the Iraqi people or Iraq. I think Iraqi people must control Iraq. Lebanese people must control Lebanon. And I'll give you an example of the Saudi role in these areas. I mean, look at Lebanon, for example. Saudi Arabia have been very supportive of Lebanon, political stability. Saudi Arabia have basically, in a recent history, have supported Lebanon with about more than $5 billion. Recently, in the Paris conference, to support Lebanon, Saudi Arabia have donated $2 billion. Saudi Arabia commercial exchange with Lebanon is $626 million. Saudi Arabia, basically, tourists used to be more than 20% of the Arab tourists to Lebanon. So we have been the party that is constructive in Lebanon. We send tourists to Lebanon. Iran sends terrorists to Lebanon. We send businessmen. Iran sends military advisors. We build hotels. We build the tourism sector. We create jobs. Iran create terrorists. We want Lebanon to be a better country, to be a stronger country, to be more stable. We want Lebanese people to advance, to be a prosperous country. Iran wants Lebanon to fight their own wars. Iran wants Lebanon to do their own expansionist project in Tehran. And if what the supreme leader in Iran wants is just about religion, then why do we always see a wali al-faqih, a supreme leader who comes from Iran? Why don't we see a Lebanese supreme leader or Iraqi supreme leader that the Iranian mullahs follow? We will never see that because Iran wants to use the Lebanon and Iraq and the Lebanese people as tools for their expansionist policies.
So if we look at it, though, it seems like there's kind of a de-escalation on the Israeli conflict, whereas there's an escalation on the Iranian conflict, not just with Saudi Arabia, but with Israel and various other countries. So the big question I have, and we talk about peace in the Middle East, and that's been a big question for a number of years, it seems like, if you're bringing up the sort of Nazi Germany allegory, that we're heading in the wrong direction. It seems like, Iran is expansionist, it's supporting terrorist groups. There's conflict in Yemen, there's conflict in Lebanon, there's conflict in Syria, there's conflict in Iran. Where does it end? How do we get to this peace in the Middle East? How do we move towards some sort of sane solution? Because we seem to be going in the wrong direction.
That's a great question. It should be asked to the Iranian regime.
We've asked them.
Because we are the party that we did not launch, we did not shot any bullet towards Iran. Mm-hmm. We're not launching ballistic missiles towards Iran. They are the party that is doing all these malign activities in the Middle East. What I'm saying is we need to pressure the Iranian regime to stop these activities that will lead us to a bigger conflict. If we do nothing, just like we did in the past years, it will lead us to a bigger conflict. Because 5 years ago, there was no ballistic missile launched towards Saudi Arabia. 20 years ago, there was no Iranian militia in Iraq. So if we the trend is a continuous Iranian regime escalation in the region that will lead to a bigger conflict. But also at the same time, Iranian regime is having problems. They are basically destructive force. They're creating instability in the region. They have problem with their own country. They're using their domestic politics to serve their foreign policy, their expansionist foreign policy, instead of serving their own people. Look at the Iranian currency right now. It's at worse positions. Look at the Iranian economy. Where's it heading? I believe that the Iranian regime should stop their malign activities and focus on the Iranian people, just like what we're doing in Saudi Arabia. I mean, look at what's happening is exactly the opposite. We in Saudi Arabia since 1979 have doubled our GDP is 10 times more than 1979. We in Saudi Arabia since 1979 have doubled our GDP is 10 times more than 1979. In Iran, we used to have basically close GDP in 1979. Now we're more than half, more than double of the Iranian GDP. Look at the GDP per capita. The Saudi people GDP per capita is way more than the Iranians. Look at the basically life expectancy. If you live in Saudi Arabia, you'll live 4 years more than in Iran. Look at our health system. Look at our education system. Look at our social reforms, our economic reform in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, there was never social media platform that was blocked. In Iran, they're continuing to block social media platforms. We're a country that wants to be part of the global system. We're proud of our values. We're proud of our cultures. We are modernizing. We are not westernizing or easternizing Saudi Arabia. We're moving forward based on our own values, but we're moving forward. We have forward-looking vision. They have a backward-looking vision. We have Vision 2030. They have Vision 1979, basically. And that is the problem. It's a clash of visions between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
I've been to Iran, I've been to Saudi Arabia. The one thing that strikes me as very similar between both cultures is they have a very young population in Saudi, a very young population in Iran. In Saudi Arabia, there seems to be a tremendous push from the young people for change, for modernization, all different kinds of social movements. You actually see, especially the young people in Tehran, who have satellite TV and who have relatives in LA or in London, somewhat of the same mindset. Why is it so completely different politically? Because you've got young people who seem to be not that far apart.
Yes.
But politically, it seems to be everyone's moving 100 miles in a different direction.
Here's the big difference. First of all, I think the Iranian people are great people. I think the Iranian people want to build their country. They want to move it forward, and they deserve better. The big difference is there are extremists in Saudi, but they're on the run, and they're a minority. There are extremists in Iran, but they're running the country, and they're a minority, basically. And that is the big difference between us and Iran. Look at, and you mentioned the Iranian people living abroad, basically, including in the United States. There are millions of people, millions of Iranians live in the United States and Germany and other countries in Europe. Have you seen any Saudi minority that lives in Europe or United States? We've sent hundreds of thousands of students to the United States. More than 98% of them come back. Why? What's the reason? Because they have hope, because they want to move their country forward, because they feel that their country is going towards the right direction. And even the 1.5% that continue to stay in the United States, I meet some of them. They work in Google, YouTube, and other companies in the United States. Their future project is in Saudi. They want to come back because Saudi Arabia's ambition is to serve their own citizens, to move their country forward. It's different from the Iranian regime, extremist regime in Iran.
So also referenced in your op-ed, which I found interesting, is you quote Ali Reza Zakani, who says there's 3 Arab capitals that are already a subsidiary of the Islamic Revolution: Beirut, Baghdad, and Damascus. So if that's the case, where do they stop?
Well, they mentioned 4 capitals: Beirut, Baghdad, and Damascus, and the fourth one, they meant Sana'a in Yemen. I don't think the Yemeni people want to be basically invaded by the Iranian regime. They want their country to be independent, and they should be independent. They have a great country and great people. And I don't think the Lebanese people want to be part of Iran. Just like what Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, said in one of his videos, old videos, that Lebanon should not be an independent country. It should be part of the Iranian expansionist ideology, basically. I don't think the Lebanese people want that. I don't think the Iraqi people want that. I don't think the Syrian people want that. I don't think anyone in the region wants to be part of Iran. They want to make their country better and to move it forward.